Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to the fourth beer out of this fantastic Vocation's Naughty and Nice selection box. And this time is the beer that I'm referring to, definitely not a Snickers Imperial Stout. Now, to be honest, time has flown with these. I was kind of thinking, is this going to start getting repetitive and get bored? And before we know it, we're at number 4 already. And I did say, when I did the kind of intro to my overview video for this box set, which if you're watching this on the day of release isn't even out yet, that well, actually, this one and the next one were the two I was most looking forward to. I love peanutty flavours in Impy Stouts, and this, being, well, Snickers orientated, is definitely going to have some of that, hopefully. Just before we get into my thoughts on what this beer might be like before opening it, I'm just going to give you the kind of official wording from Vocation on this. So officially, this is called the Peanut Caramel Chocolate Imperial Stout, and its description is a milk chocolate imperial stout packed with roasted peanut flavour and a caramel nougat centre. That word's tripped me up again. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Again, a very cheeky line at the end there, but I do love the branding for this. So yeah, packed with peanut flavour, hopefully. But this beer, theoretically, could be quite similar to the previous one, which was the Twix-themed stout. Now, basically, that one was chocolate caramel biscuit, and this is chocolate caramel nuts. So, well, that does leave me a little bit concerned, because that previous one, whilst it was very enjoyable to drink, was maybe a little bit too simple, too sweet, too, I'm not sure what. But it was a great experience, but was it a great beer? I'm still a little bit undecided. So, let's find out if this one is any better. Before we get into it then, here is a quick look at the can, and it has got some very distinctive branding, this one, as all of them have, to be fair. Again, this is the same format as all of them. This one is a whopping 9%, as it is the 4th in the series, and we started at 6. Info on the back as usual there, but yeah, it is a great looking can. In the glass there, no surprise, it looks almost exactly the same as, well, all of the others really. Jet black beer, nice kind of light caramel off-white coloured head. From the port, I actually think this is going to be pretty dark, so let's hold it up to the light. And yeah, that one, ooh, tiny, maybe the tiniest bit of light shining through, but it could be the reflection. So I'm going to go with, yeah, it's a properly jet black beer, this one, certainly more so than the previous. Heads, well, hanging around a bit to say it's 9%, that's pretty impressive. Let's do the aromas. So, oh, it smells, oh yeah, so all of the previous ones had sweetness as the predominant aroma, whether it was caramel, honeycomb, whatever. It was all very sugary on the nose. This one, whilst undeniably sweet, that nutty aroma really comes through. Little bit sweet, little bit salty, bit of umami, bit of peanut brittle kind of thing going on. And I think this might just be a bit roastier than some of the previous ones, which was my main complaint about them. So I've got high hopes. Let's get into it. Cheers. Wow. Okay. We're back in the ballpark now. Again, I'm going to reiterate some of the same small complaints I've had over previous beers, but this beer, out of all so far, is the one that probably diverges the most from the actual chocolate it's trying to replicate. But at the same time, or maybe even as a result of that, becomes the one that's more complex, more considered, more roasty, depthy, complex, almost more of just a generally better complex beer. And whilst there is still room for improvement on that kind of deep malt, rich, roasty front that I would want from a 9% Imperial Stout, it's a damn sight better than the last couple were. So what does this all really mean? Well, top to bottom taste test to try and work it out. So initially. As with all of them, really mild, prickly carbonation on the front of the tongue. You get a huge waft of peanut aroma as you start to drink it. Front of the tongue, you start with that slightly dull peanut, almost umami kind of flavour. Very nutty, almost savoury, but not quite, because middle phase, caramel comes in, the nut stays throughout, and for the first time in this series, just a smidge of alcohol burn that just tickles and teases before you swallow it. On the swallow, it goes quite fresh, a little dry, a little bit more booziness, and then the aftertaste starts off quite clean, and as you sit back, quite a lot of the nuttiness starts to disappear, and a bit of that milk chocolate starts to just resonate lightly in the background. It's not sickly, though it is sweet. The booze and that nutty element really balance everything out quite a lot. It is insanely drinkable, once again, for 9%. It's almost entirely hidden the booze still at 9%. And there is always a question of, is that what you really want? There is no doubt that some beers that maybe taste their ABV are less impressive somehow than those that don't. But there is a fine line. You can maybe mask it too much, and I am starting to ask that question of this entire collection so far, if I'm honest. But I have to say, I've not been properly wowed since that first one, the 6% Malteser inspired beer, until this one. Those two really are neck and neck for me. They are similar in a lot of ways, obviously quite vastly different in terms of ABV, but it's a fine sipping beer, this one, and something I had thought about after the previous beer, after slating it a little bit, basically just because it was almost a bit too friendly, I believe was what I said. And that whilst that might be the case if you're just experiencing one beer as a one-off and trying to appreciate all of its technical elements, all of its flavours, but this is a selection box and ultimately has been designed to be a Christmas present, a gift for Christmas Day. And quite often, Christmas Day is hectic, you drink too much, you eat too much and everything else. And actually, well, quite often you have a few beers, have the food, and then actually you don't end up drinking all that much because you're just in a state of bloat, essentially. These are low-carb beers that are incredibly easy to drink, and actually, chilling out Christmas afternoon with one of these higher ABV ones that just slips back, no effort at all, nice sweet flavours, especially this one with that nice balanced peanutiness, I think, actually, for that day, might just be the ticket. Right then, let's take a look at the can. On the front of the can then, Vocation Special Edition, 9% Naughty and Nice, Roasted Peanut, Caramel Chocolate, Imperial Stout. On the back, it's got the same Naughty and Nice and the same spiel that all of these cans have had, basically saying that there's a whole range inspired by everyone's favourite festive chocolates, fit for any festive celebration, wink wink. The tasting notes on this one are rich, chocolate and roasted. Come back to that in a minute, and we get the same description as we had on the card at the beginning, which was milk chocolate Imperial Stout packed with roasted peanut flavour and a caramel nugget centre. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And then on the other side, again, we don't get the full ingredients, but we do get the allergens, which in this case are, as usual, malted barley, oats, lactose, and I think they've made a mistake here because it doesn't list nuts. And nuts are a pretty important allergen, which also raises a few questions of some of the other beers, because on a few of them I said there is a slightly savoury, nutty umaminess, and it is reminiscent of the flavour in here, which is much more dialed back, much more reserved in the others, almost as just a balancing element, whereas in this it's a focal point. And it doesn't list it on here either. So I wouldn't be surprised if quite a few of these actually contain nuts, or there is of course the option that none of them contain nuts and they've mimicked that flavour somehow, but I can't say which is honestly the case. Coming back to those tasting notes then, rich, chocolate and roasted. Rich, yes, it is fairly rich. It's not the richest stout at 9%, but it's certainly rich. Chocolate, yes, absolutely. Roasted, it's more roasted peanuts, lightly roasted savouriness. It's not roasty stout. It's just not got that big roasted malt experience that you get in, I say, kind of a traditional Imperial. But it is undeniably roasty, just maybe not in the way that people would expect, well, of an Imperial Stout. So, final thoughts. Well, that nuttiness continues to evolve on the nose, getting a little bit broader, a little bit more dynamic. It's getting even a touch boozier on the nose now as well. And for a big, deep, rich beer, it's actually got quite a clean aroma. It doesn't come across on the aroma like it's going to be cloying or overly treacly or anything like that. And to be fair, it isn't. It is quite a... It's kind of refreshing for the style. It's not a refreshing beer by any means, but compared to most, it is a bit. And we haven't actually talked about mouthfeel, which is probably an important component to this. But, and I said this about the previous beer as well, I would have expected as we go up in ABV that the mouthfeel and the body on these beers becomes much more luscious, much more intense. And it hasn't really changed a whole deal from that 6%er, or at least it doesn't feel like it. I'm not doing them back to back, so it's hard to say, but yeah, it's whilst I wouldn't call it a thin beer, it's certainly not thick for the style either, so something to keep in mind. However, I must say, I absolutely love this. I think it's fantastic. I would like it, yes, to be a little bit roastier, a little bit more depthy, a little bit thicker, but as I say, Christmas Day afternoon, I would be absolutely delighted if you stuck a can of that in front of me. So it's definitely not all bad. And that is all I've got to say about it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already, subscribe if you will be so kind. And I'll catch you next time. Cheers.